I think one of the most important things we can do is to try to get terms like Mahu or like Two Spirit accepted into the mainstream and understood by people. That's really the best solution. And when we started our work 10 years ago, the word Mahu could not be printed in the newspaper because it had been sort of denigrated and kind of came to mean faggot, queer,
Wow.
um, back when queer was a bad word.
Mhm.
Um, and now, as a result of the Kapai Mahu work and having an exhibition at a museum and a movie and Oscar awards and all of that stuff, now you can say Mahu in the newspaper.
Before listening to today's exciting episode, I just want to introduce myself. It's Dr. Andrew Rimby. I am the host of the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, an arts and culture podcast. I'm so excited that you're listening or watching. Please make sure that you follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're getting the podcast. Please review us. Please share the podcast. It really means a lot. The more exposure the podcast has, the more I can book exciting guests. There's a Patreon. Ad-free episodes are on the Patreon. I also release bonus content on there. I talk about our book club, which is free. We're discussing on February 1st Wuthering Heights in honor of the Emerald Fennel adaptation that's coming out. So if you want to join the book club, it's on Zoom. It's at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just message me. I'll send you the Zoom link. Please make sure you're also following us on social media. We have a new TikTok account. It's Dr. Andrew Rimby. Long story short, I think TikTok could not handle the spicy queer male content that I was putting out there. So I had to create a new TikTok. I'm going to be extra careful now. Trust me. Also, Instagram, Facebook, Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I'll see you on there. And now, here's today's exciting episode. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Andrew Rimby. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, a special holiday episode coming out right basically as we've recorded this. So I'm really excited to talk about the Gay and Lesbian Review's new issue for November and December. It's called Ethnographic Journeys. And I've had a lot of email exchanges with Jeremy, who is the managing editor now. And, well, first, Jeremy, welcome. If you want to just maybe explain, we were talking about what you do as the managing editor. It's exciting to, have you step into this role and specifically talk about one of your most recent issues that you've done as the managing editor. So, welcome. What's it look like here as the managing editor of the Gay and Lesbian Review?
Well, thank you very much for having us and having this discussion on the podcast, Andrew, and for all your work and support of the review over the years. I became the managing editor back in the spring, and I had been involved with the review for a long time, but this is a much bigger role for me, stepping in as our founding editor-in-chief, Richard Schneider, gets ready to semi-retire. Although, as we were discussing before we started recording, Richard will never fully step away from the magazine. It's been his baby for 32 years, and he is really the guiding force behind this magazine from day one. Um, as the managing editor, I'm gradually taking on more and more of the responsibilities for putting the magazine together. I think this was the first one that I fully curated all of the feature articles for, and a lot of the other columns as well. Um, it's an idea that actually was originally Richard's, to do an ethnographic issue. We had in the past done some issues on specific parts of the world, but for this one we really wanted to kind of take a sort of global approach. We've got a couple of pieces from Chase and Dean here, who are writing about territories that are controlled by the United States, although, we can discuss exactly, what that means in deeper detail. And we have a couple of pieces in the issue from Africa and a couple of pieces in the issue from South Asia. And we had a lot of submissions from around the world. We could have done a fully Africa issue if we had chosen to go that way because there were so many different submissions from Africa. And so my role was going through all of these different submissions and also recruiting people. I mean, Dean is somebody who has had a relationship with the magazine for a long time and who had shared an idea with Richard some time ago for a piece on Hawaiian culture. And then Chase is actually somebody I met in a class on archival research that we took together. We were classmates in this month-long course offered through Queer History Boston. And I learned about his research and thought it would be a good fit for the issue. My best friend is a Native American from Oklahoma, like Chase is, and I really wanted to have that kind of representation in this issue, along with representation of other cultures from all around the globe.
Wonderful. No, thank you so much. And, I want to introduce two of the contributing writers, which, like Jeremy said, there's more articles and writers in this issue, but very lucky to be joined with Chase Bryer and Dean Hamer. So, Dean, how long have you been? Jeremy was alluding to, you've had this long history with the Gay and Lesbian Review. How long back does this go with you contributing to the magazine?
Um, Not so much contributing as following since I guess when did the magazine start? Was it 90s sometime, right?
94, yeah.
Yeah, which was just about the same time that my own research on genetics and sexual orientation came out. So there was a real sort of sudden burst of energy around LGBTQ issues at that time, um, with a lot more ups and downs, mostly downs actually at the time, but just a lot of activity. So I was very excited when it came out, especially since I was had been a Harvard graduate student. I did my biochemistry degree at Harvard Medical School, and here's this review coming out of Harvard. So who better to judge upon gay life than experts, professional types at Harvard? So yes, it has been a long time, and it's only really in the last, oh gosh, 20 years that I've been doing more ethnographic, sociological, historical type of research that it's become particularly interesting as an intellectual magazine, I guess you would say, for our community. So
Yeah.
it's been a long and varied relationship, I would say.
Yeah. Well, and as a longtime reader,
Not a marriage, more of a flirtation.
well, and as a longtime reader, I know Stephen and Richard would love to hear this answer you'll give, Dean, but like, what do you enjoy the most out of the magazine, like over these years?
I just like the varied intellectual approach. And I
Mm.
like the fact that it's smart people, but not so heavily invested in academic language that makes a lot of smart people difficult to digest, I have to say. So I
So
appreciate that very much.
that it reaches the
It's more like reading the
public.
New Yorker and not
Mhm.
reading an academic journal, which is, that's what people like to read, actually. Yeah. So
Exactly.
good.
Yeah. It's not seeped in theory. And, while, pivoting to Chase, I feel like this, you're a PhD candidate, right?
I am, yeah. Yep, I'm a fifth year PhD candidate here at Brown University School of Public Health. So in Providence, Rhode Island, on the ancestral homelands of the Narragansett Indian tribe. Yeah, so I can provide a bit of background about myself too. Yeah, as Jeremy had mentioned, I am Native American, but usually I just say I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation of Oklahoma. So my dissertation here at Brown is focused on Two-Spirit and Indigenous LGBT aging with HIV, so more descriptive cultural gerontology. And I was really drawn into this work through my former social work program at Washington University in St. Louis. I was a part of this really awesome group of social workers through the Catherine M. Booter Center at the Center for American Indian Studies that trains Native social workers. So through that program, I was able to complete my clinical practicum in a long-term care setting, working with older adults living with HIV. And that sort of got my mind stirring about what that might look like from an Indigenous life course perspective, and especially within the Two-Spirit health movement. So that's kind of what brings me to this space.
Are there any books that, for the public listening right now, you recommend specifically about the indigenous peoples of America, of the Americas?
Yeah, Andrew, excellent question. So I actually pulled some of my favorites from my bookshelf just before this podcast today. So I'm happy to give them a quick plug for folks who are interested, and I'm sure you could link them in the show notes.
Sure.
One that comes to mind, and this is more based here in New England, but it's called Race to the Truth, Colonization in the Wampanoag Story. I know it's kind of hard to see with this blurred screen, but let me see if I can unblur. Yeah, there we go. Uh,
Oh, wonderful.
yeah,
Okay.
beautiful book here by Linda Coombs. So this is a great read, very approachable, digestible. I also really love works by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I'm not sure if you've read Braiding Sweetgrass or The Serviceberry. So they have amazing books that can really elucidate some indigenous ways of knowing and being. And they talk a lot about the intrinsic nature of plants, for example, and what they can teach us about humanity and indigenous cultures. There's also There that folks may be familiar with, that was a bestseller by Tommy Orange, that takes place in urban Oakland, I believe. So this is a great read as well. That can kind of give you a glimpse into the Native experience. And lastly, Notable Native People by Adrienne Keene is an awesome read that really highlights some amazing Indigenous leaders, primarily in the US and Canada. I think she may highlight some international perspectives too, if I'm not mistaken. But Adrian's an amazing Cherokee scholar who actually was a professor at Brown for a number of years. So would definitely recommend checking out those books.
No, thank you. And the
Yeah.
book I'm thinking about that just got published is by Kathleen Duvall, and it's called Native Nations, A Millennium in North
Yeah.
America. And it's about like 500 pages, but it looks
Oh,
like an
wow.
excellent, concise history. And I just got from the library an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States, which I really, Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. Um,
Excellent. Yep, I'm familiar with both of those names, and yeah, I guess these ones are a bit more maybe approachable for the non-academic audience too. Um, yeah,
No, this is
all
great.
great recs.
This is great. And what I love is Dean, Jeremy, Chase. I mean, Jeremy, what's your background? Is it in humanities or is it kind of similar to Dean and Chase where it's like intersectional social science meets health slash humanities?
My background is in the visual arts and in
Okay.
journalism. I came to the review after spending 14 years as a reporter for the Boston Globe and doing an increasing amount of editing in the last 6 years. So I'm a little bit of an outlier because most of the folks involved with the magazine do have a little bit more of a an academic background and a social science background, and I'm just I'm here to attempt to be a wordsmith more than anything else. But I also, I bring I bring some of the journalistic experience, of course, into my new role as well.
Well, and through the podcast, through reading the magazine, I've developed a lot of friendships with those who've contributed and still contribute, of course. But Brian Alessandro, like we live close to each other in New Jersey. So like watch films. I bring my husband and he has, his husband, and we like do all these queer film screenings. We just did Frankenstein. But I just love that the magazine, I feel all of the backgrounds that each of us offer and insights and academic journeys, or even like Dean was saying, having that approachable language with the magazine, it really seems that the readership does cross over to every kind of profession. Like, is that something you realize, Jeremy, just with even the writers who are submitting? Like, do they just, it seems like they are outside of not just academia, but they're in all different spaces.
We do get submissions from people from all kinds of different backgrounds. A fair number of the contributors are academics or former academics, but who, like Dean said, appreciate more approachable language for the general reader instead of having to write in like heavily footnoted, sort of dense with citations kind of text. You mentioned the New Yorker, which I've been a fan of since I was a very young guy, and the other magazine or publication that I would compare it to is the New York Review of Books, which was Richard's kind of original template for what he wanted the magazine to be. The kind of mix of literary and historical and current issues. The contributors really do. I mean, especially in this issue, you've heard about Dean and Chase and their backgrounds a little bit. We had a piece by Purvi Gupta, who is a journalist in India. We had a piece by Sunil Babu Pant, who is in Nepal and is an activist for LGBTQ rights there, and a filmmaker and a writer, and does all kinds of things. We have John Motoroki, who is, as far as I know about him, primarily a freelance writer. I'm sure he has other things he does as well, because nobody makes a good living as a freelance writer. And Kelly Neely, who is an educator around trans issues and sexual health, I think. I'm pulling from memory here without checking any sources. But these contributors sort of reflect who what the range is to some degree. We also have a piece in this issue by Alfred Korn, who is primarily known as a poet, but is sharing remembrances with Edmund White, who died a few months ago. And we have a piece by Frank Rizzo, who is primarily a writer for Variety magazine, but also contributes to a lot of other publications. And so it's all across the board. And we're working with more and more young writers who are just kind of getting their start as published writers. And I'm trying to provide a little bit of mentorship and guidance to a few of those folks. So it's a broad swath, and really trying to represent to the best of our ability the entire LGBTQ community and a real range of experiences.
No, thank you for that. And I've had Frank Rizzo on the podcast, so definitely, you know, everyone listen to that. So he was such a fun time. Yeah, his like theater film critical hat is fascinating. And I always say the Gay and Lesbian Review, and not just because it's in my ad, I do, but it's true. It's a magazine where you're always going to walk away with it, either learning about a new film, a TV show, a book to read. It brings you on a deep dive that you don't know necessarily when you open it where it's going to head. And I love that. So, I mean, Dean and Chase, I'm really curious because as Jeremy said, this whole theme about ethnographic journeys. Like when I teach an ethnographic narrative in my writing courses, and like my students right now are finishing a research essay on it. But, I approach it more in the literary, rhetorical kind of space of like they take a pop culture topic, they do 10 hours of research with that topic, and then they do personal interviews with those who are invested in that pop culture subject. But like ethnography is rooted in anthropology, really, as an idea. But like what I love is you each are bringing a different kind of understanding and like looking outside of the American European model of like heterosexuality, homosexuality, and trying to explore indigenous cultures and reclaiming ideas of sexuality that have been, you know, deliberately erased by white European American models. Like, so how do you each approach that? I mean, Dean, if you want to speak to, a little about your article, like maybe what inspired it, what's the um like research question that prompted this whole discovery that you do with Hawaii.
Yeah. So my article is about a really remarkable historical figure. His name is Kaumi, and he was born in the early 1800s. He was like so many gay guys, a really bright, smart person who became one of the first students of the first missionaries that came over, and actually was one of the very first Hawaiians to become literate and to be able to read and write in English first, and then in Hawaiian. And he helped educate other high chiefs into literacy. He was also a healer. And he became the intimate friend of the king-to-be, Kamehameha III. And there's actually a word in Hawaiian called aikane, which is reserved for intimate friends of the same sex. They can just be friends, but they can also be intimate friends or lovers or boyfriends, we might say in modern parlance. And as such, he was elevated and became the co-ruler of the kingdom. It was the first time this had ever happened. But to Hawaiians, it was no surprise because this type of relationship was already integrated into their society and was very common. Most of the great leaders of Hawaii had aikane. Even Kamehameha the Great, the one who unified the kingdom, had several aikane, in fact. But as you might expect, the missionaries were not so happy with this. And as more and more Hawaiians became Christianized, they also were very unhappy with this. And so after just 2 years of this co-rulership, they grabbed Kaumi and dragged him to the fort and were ready to execute him. But they didn't because his boyfriend, the king, rushed in and actually saved him, physically saved him, had a tussling match. A remarkable scene, really. But after that, Kaumi left the relationship. And we think the reason why is because he knew if this kept up, that the whole kingdom was going to fail. There would be a civil war. His lover, the king, would likely be killed. And so he gives up the relationship. And after that, he simply disappears from history. And when he is written about, he's written about as a real evil, the example of what will happen if you're not Christian. And so that's the story that we wanted to revive. I came into this, I'm not Hawaiian myself. I've been there 20 years and I've been working on these topics a lot with a lot of people in the Hawaiian community. Our work really started as a way to give people a voice, which they didn't have necessarily before because we're good at making films and good at writing and stuff. But the longer I've been in Hawaii, the more I start thinking about Kaumi's story, not as, oh, this is some gay guy who was persecuted, but as this is somebody who is a really important figure, who did important things, who was a hero in his own right. And the only sort of gay thing about it, the only queer thing is that his story was queered in the sense that it was erased just because of the sexual part of it. So I really now am coming around or trying to come around to the Hawaiian point of view of seeing him as an important person who Western views have diminished, but isn't really diminished as a person. So yeah, he's quite a fascinating figure, and we're really happy to have a chance to bring his story to wider attention.
Yeah. And, forgive me for using a Western philosophy example, but is it similar to the Platonic kind of ideal in the symposium, or what you're talking about as a system interwoven into the culture with Kwame differs outside
Yeah,
of that? this holiday season, I'm so excited to talk about my favorite academic publisher, Broadview Press. Broadview Press has just incredible anthologies, classic books, history of literature, philosophy, you name it in the humanities, Broadview Press has you covered. So I've had guests on here like Dr. Jeffrey Andrew Weinstock to talk about his pop culture for beginners book, his Mad Scientist Guide to Composition. He's an incredible horror gothic literary scholar. So definitely listen to the podcast I did with him. I had a vampire literature discussion, a wonderful Wizard of Oz conversation. So always so many exciting Broadview Press guests that I have on, and I have a few new episodes coming out soon this holiday season, all about how to teach writing and composition. So look out for them. And there's a few books that I definitely want to highlight. So make sure you have on your radar Broadview Press's new anthology of science fiction, a book about original inquiry, a guide to research for undergraduates. I mean, when I'm teaching my students the research essay, definitely I could use that book. Good Reasoning Matters, a guide to critical thinking in a digital age. Okay, well, I hope to talk to all of these editors, but yes, we definitely need critical thinking in this digital age. I keep saying we need to have courses in college for social media literacy to understand what is going on these apps. So that's called Good Reasoning Matters. And then the last book is Solving the Puzzle, A Student's Guide to Historical Research and Writing. These are all incredible books to assign your students, specifically in any kind of literary or humanities research-based course, which almost every humanities course now is research-based. Also, Broadview Press is interested in hearing from librarians. So if you're a librarian or you know a librarian, please take down this information. There is a new subscription called Broadview Digital Bookshelves, which gives you access to over 450 critical editions of literary classics from Beowulf to Virginia Woolf, all for one affordable price. Again, that's over 450 editions of literary classics. Go to ebooks at broadviewpress.com. So if you're even just a classic literature lover, check out Broadview Digital Bookshelves. Okay, I hope you all enjoy Broadview Press, and I have a 20% off code for you all. It is Ivory Tower, right? Ivory Tower at the checkout, and you will receive 20% off all Broadview Press orders.
Are you a fan of classic Hollywood movies?
Are you a fan of queer cinema?
Then do we have the podcast for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Garcia.
And I'm Luke Del Mar.
And we are your hosts of That Old Gay Classic Cinema, where we take a look at some of the greatest films of all time and analyze them through a queer theoretical lens.
Let's be honest. LGBTQIA+ people have been a part of Hollywood since its inception, and this podcast celebrates those artists and entertainers of yesteryear while also taking a closer look at the queer-coded characters and stories in classic Hollywood films long before queer representation entered the mainstream.
So follow us down the road of classic cinema as we give you a guide to some of the films that touched our hearts, brains, and even gave us courage to be ourselves.
You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
All right, listeners, we're ready for our close-up.
I mean, I've talked with Andrew Lear about this extensively, and I don't really understand what that Platonic idea is exactly. But this idea of aikane, it was just that there's a word in Hawaiian palina, and palina is relationships. You're going to have a net of relationships, and it's just a type of relationship that has many different branches. Responsibility to your family, responsibility to the nation, responsibility to one another, as well as intimacy, and which can be physical intimacy. So no, it wasn't just this Platonic idea. I think he's a really fabulous person. It's a way of relating to other people. And what's interesting to me is that Hawaiians had a special word for that type of intimacy for people of the same sex. And that's fairly unusual. Certainly in the Western Christianized, Mohammedized world, it's not known at all. And to me, it says something about the culture that there was a recognition that there's different types of relationships that you can have, and that they all have their own value.
Yeah. So it's kind of like bro culture in a way, like gym
Maybe,
bro culture. Maybe. I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, there's definitely
Try to
some.
think of it in its own terms.
Yes,
That's my best advice I can offer. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I'm sure when Andrew Lear came on the podcast, he also, we talked a lot about the power dynamics that, like what you're saying, it's not the teacher in this more privileged
So,
position.
for example,
Yeah.
Kaomi was the aikane of Kamehameha III, and also older than him. And if anything, the teacher, because he knew healing and stuff. But Kaomi had previously been the aikane of Kauakini, the governor of Hawaii, who was older than him. And Kauakini then in turn was an aikane to Kamehameha III. So it's more like a genealogy rather than this sort of older, younger type of thing. I don't think it wasn't codified in that particular way.
Oh,
and this all, I don't know if any of you guys got to watch Chief of War, the HBO, no, the Apple TV thing. It's all about Hawaiian history. It was a really, really, really big deal here. And in that, there's like 8 episodes, and most of it is like fighting off the Europeans or fighting each other, really. There's like a 30-second scene where 2 bros wake up in the same hut together, and they have their arms around each other. And there was a huge commotion about that because they were iconic and people just lost their minds. A lot of Hawaiians lost their minds. We don't do that. That's not the way that we do things and stuff. And other people were like, yeah, actually, it was exactly the way things were. And that's why it was included. So,
yeah, you're making me think. I'm a 19th century scholar, of literature, and there's this book called The Homoerotics of Orientalism, which takes its title from Edward Said's work. But Joseph Allen Boone, the scholar, looks a lot at Moby Dick and Ishmael and Queequeg, and how Queequeg is looked at as this indigenous, well, not used in that term. A slur is used, and like how his queerness and sexual, not even sexual, but like you're saying, this wanting to bond with another man in bed, like just laying together, is seen as so against the white missionary doctrine. So I think that's fascinating that, this example exists that you bring to bear, Dean. And like, what kind of sources did you look to for this history? Like, is there a popular book that exists or documentaries that exist?
Yeah. No, because this all takes place in the early 1830s, which is just at the point where Hawaii is becoming literate. So there's very little written material, and actually almost everything that we have is written in English, either by missionaries who are rather critical of the situation, or by one of the merchants who was absolutely amazed. He happened to live next to Kaomi, and he writes about this incredible hula performance that took place at his house, and how everybody loved it, and they were dancing from night until day. So there's a lot of that. And then a lot of the history is written by Hawaiian historians in Hawaiian, but 20 or 30 years later, and they've been highly Christianized. So you have to read it through that lens as well. So there were very limited resources available. But what there was enough to piece together a pretty interesting story.
Well, and like you're saying, Dean, what's exciting with your article, and I can't wait for more to read it, is there's definitely a need for this history to be amplified. Like, it's not like there's a full text that exists about this topic.
No, this is a case where there has not been a full text, and where what there has been really sort of bastardized.
Mm.
And also, it's just an interesting point, and I imagine this probably happens in Native American history as well, where if you say, oh, I'm only going to read things that are in Hawaiian that were written by Hawaiians. I understand the reason for wanting to do that. And I think for a lot of things, that's absolutely appropriate. But if you were to do that in the case of Taomi, you would essentially get the missionary view and only the missionary view of what was going on, because they were all missionary trained and stuff. So it's an interesting history type of exercise to try to pierce together what was really going on. Fortunately, there's a really amazing Hawaiian scholar. Her name is Noe Silva. She teaches at UH, who's really good about going to primary sources. She's the one who figured out that as Hawaii was being annexed by the United States and illegally taken over, that Hawaiians weren't just sitting around going, oh, this is horrible. They actually had a huge petition campaign. And they had basically 80% of the Hawaiian population signed petitions saying, no, this is wrong. You shouldn't do that. And she discovered those archives deep, deep buried in the archives in DC someplace, which had been really, it was sort of the beginning of a revelation of how much Hawaiian history had been ignored because people weren't doing things in Hawaiian. And now, even to this day, families are very proud to look back and find their genealogies and find their ancestors who signed that petition. So, yeah, it's complicated.
You helped my job, Dean, which is, chase, what do you think about what Dean is saying, that there is some kind of bridge between Indigenous Hawaiians and the Native American communities when it comes to the sources that you're reading?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a pretty good segue into the piece that I had contributed for this issue. And I guess speaking on ethnography, mine's more of, I guess you could say, an autoethnography that it's very first person and experimental, and really gave me an opportunity to reflect on helping to co-organize the 37th annual International Two-Spirit Gathering in my home territories back in Oklahoma. And it was a pretty magical moment. So I just kind of got a cold email. I guess this was last year, by someone named Cray Beaumont, who's Cherokee in Delaware. So I hopped on a call with him. He's with the All Nations Two Spirit Society in Tulsa, which is an amazing Two Spirit organizing group there. And he was like, "Hey, I see you do Two Spirit health research. We're actually organizing the International Two Spirit Gathering this year. Would you want to come help organize?" That was such an honor to be asked to go organize, and I could hardly believe when he said the place where it would occur, because it was actually in the very same place that I went to a United Methodist Church camp every summer, in this pretty rural canyon and canyon camp in Hinton, Oklahoma. So that was sort of I guess, serendipitous moment, and how could I possibly say no to go back for such an event? It's kind of funny how life works that way. Yeah, and at this same event, I'm bad with math, but I think it was 1990 at the third annual Intertribal First Nations Lesbian and Gay Conference is where the term Two Spirit had been introduced by an Anishinaabe elder there. And to Dean's point, this is a contemporary term, and Two Spirit, as in was made in the 90s, but it's really serves as a placeholder and a way for Indigenous people to organize around these diverse sexualities and gender expressions that were really suppressed through colonization of the Americas. So you could see the suppression occurring all across the US and Canada, perhaps most evidently in the federal Indian boarding schools that were placed. So there are hundreds of those government funded, often Catholic run boarding schools where Native youth were stolen from their tribal territories, placed in the hands of non-natives, and really forced to assimilate to a new way of being, to really quote unquote Americanize, Europeanize them into these very rigid gender structures that weren't there previously, that being male and female. So before that, many tribal communities in the mainland as well had words that would even describe folks who were more gender expansive, or what now has become Two Spirit. So you can think of the Nadle, that is in Navajo Nation, the Mahu, I believe that's the appropriate term, right, Dean, in
Yes.
Hawaii. So
Yeah.
you can see that connection there, and many other tribal communities have examples of language that they use to describe Two-Spirit folks in their communities. And for many tribes, these folks were revered, they were sacred, really pivotal members of their tribal communities. And so that word Two-Spirit is really a way to honor those identities and really serves, often I'll hear it described as a placeholder for Native LGBTQ folks to really connect more closely with their queerness and reconcile that with their indigeneity. So I was really honored to contribute to that piece. I was able to connect with some amazing Two-Spirit Chickasaw folks at that gathering whose voices are also reflected in the manuscript. So one of those is Land O'Lakes, who's an amazing Two-Spirit indigiqueer activist and drag performer in the Bay Area, as well as some folks down in Chickasaw country like Faithlin Seawright and Trenton Williams, who are doing amazing work and revitalizing our Chickasaw languages and culture down in our home territories in southern Oklahoma. So I was really honored to be a part of this issue and to really work towards reflecting on how my experience has been in coming into my own identity as a queer Chickasaw and Two-Spirit person.
Wow. And wow, I mean, first, Land O'Lakes, what an interesting way to reclaim such racist imagery
Right,
with
right.
that company. Uh, so it would kind of be like if there's a drag performer named Aunt Jemima, which I don't know, maybe there is. But
Maybe
I
there is.
also
Yeah. Maybe
what
she's listening.
maybe. Well, and something I'm curious about is, and Dean, if you want to jump in too, when it comes to um the indigenous, queer Hawaiian work you've done. But Chase, like, where do people go wrong with the two-spirit mythology? Like, I feel like I used to hear a lot about in my gender studies courses, like it would be brought up in terms of indigenous queerness, like, oh, and well, in Native American culture, there's something known as the two spirits, which is kind of similar to the transgender community. And I don't know, it always started to like get forcing their idea of the two spirit community onto this idea of what does it look like in a white European context. So like what kind of myths still exist that people believe about the two spirit community?
Yeah, excellent question. So I feel like there has been a lot of homogenization. Is that the correct term with other identities? But I think the most important thing to know about Two-Spirit is that it is a distinctly indigenous term. So it would be inappropriate if folks are using the terminology of Two-Spirit if they don't have a tribal background, again, because it was created in this very distinctly indigenous context at that international gathering in the 90s. And there have been some authors who have written, I believe Gregory Smithers might be the name. They have a book out now. I believe it's called Becoming Two Spirits. You might have to name check me there. But I know they did some close consultation with some Two Spirit elders throughout Canada and here in the US. But they really talk about how Two Spirit came to be at a time, especially when thinking about the AIDS crisis and the distinct cultural needs of tribal communities that were facing not only that crisis, but also contending with these horrific legacies of historical trauma where their needs already weren't being met and where many tribal communities were already sort of facing their own apocalypse in some senses. So you hear some Indigenous scholars writing about Indigenous futurisms and what it means to be a Native person who is continuing and living and resisting into the future. Another Two-Spirit scholar who I really admire is Andrew Olivetti, who has some really awesome work as well out there, especially around mixed race identity and Two-Spirit-ness, and has this really provocative and I think generative theory around thrivance or looking at Native communities not through this lens of damage and despair, but really thinking about the ways that Two-Spirit communities are resisting, thriving, and continuing in spite of these really horrific histories. And I think that gatherings like the International Two-Spirit Gathering and many tribal gatherings all throughout the US, Hawaii as well, are really evident of this. So one of the biggest Two-Spirit powwows that I know of that happens here in the US is the Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirits Powwow, or BATES. So if there are any listeners in the Bay Area, I definitely recommend checking out that amazing historic powwow. It takes place, I believe, the first Saturday of every year. And it's a really powerful event where many Two-Spirit folks will gather. And that's also open to non-natives as well for folks who are interested in learning more.
Yeah. No, thank you. And
Yeah.
yeah, Dean, like, do you feel
I'll
too?
just add to that this nomenclature is important. Words are important, but it's also evolving. Just the way that it used to just be gay, and now it's LGBTQIA. That's evolved. It's the same with the use of, I think, of Indigenous in any terms in foreign languages, really. So we started our work in Hawaii with a remarkable person, Kumuhina, and she's Native Hawaiian. She is Mahu, or two-spirit, or transgender, or gender fluid like. And she's very open about that, and that's part of her cultural advocacy. She's a very important cultural figure. When we made our first film about her, we basically would say, oh, she's Mahu, parentheses, transgender. And that was what Hina described herself as. That was her voice. That was the way we were talking about it. But that's evolved since that time because we came to recognize that made too much of an exact equivalence. And so now we will just say, Mahu are individuals of dual male and female spirit. And I think that gets much closer. So it's evolving, and people just need to evolve with the times, I think. When we did our most important work probably is that Kapai Mahu. There's a story about Kapai Mahu. These are 4 Mahu who came from Tahiti and brought healing arts to Hawaii. And they put their spirit in these 4 stones that are still on the beach in Waikiki.
Wow.
So we've done a lot of work about that. And that really, I think, impressed on us how important it is to use that term Mahu itself. So I think one of the things that we can do as scholars is to try to get these at once, thought of as specialized terms like Mahu or Two-Spirit introduced into the general consciousness.
This holiday season, not only am I wearing as many holiday sweaters as I can, but I'm reading as much as I can. I've made a commitment for my holiday New Year's resolution, which is read as much as I can in my free time. So, of course, I'm holding the Gay and Lesbian Review's new magazine for the holiday season. It is called Ethnographic Journeys, and it just covers so many exciting topics. Okay, it covers the Two-Spirit journey. It covers caste and gender in India. It covers gender identities in Native African societies, culture clash in South Africa. So many wonderful film, TV reviews. If you have never gotten your hands on the Gay and Lesbian Review, you have some catching up to do. So I'm so happy because I have a promo code you can all use. It is ITBR Choice. You get a free issue of the magazine. So make the November-December issue your free magazine issue. And those over at the Gay and Lesbian Review has shared really exciting news. Until February 15th, they are accepting applications for their Writers and Artists grant. So the Gay and Lesbian Review is asking all writers and artists out there to bring their perspective, ideas, and voices to the magazine to help support emerging and unpublished LGBTQ writers, thinkers, scholars, and artists. How can you apply? Go to glreview.org. While you're there, make sure you get your hands on their new issue of their magazine. The GNLR is an incredible space for history, culture, politics, LGBTQ themed. It's where I get my book recommendations, my film recommendations, my TV recommendations, shows that are happening in New York City that are queer themed. Let's just say I'm about to see Messy White Gaze, and I know, actually, my friend who I've had on the podcast just wrote a review on it, and it's going to come out soon. So keep your eyes out. Remember, ITBR Choice promo code. Use it when you subscribe to either the print or the online edition.
I think one of the most important things we can do is to try to get terms like Mahu or like Two-Spirit accepted into the mainstream and understood by people. That's really the best solution. And when we started our work 10 years ago, the word Mahu could not be printed in the newspaper because it had been sort of denigrated and kind of came to mean faggot, queer, back when queer was a bad word. And now, as a result of the Kapai Mahu work and having an exhibition at a museum and a movie and Oscar awards and all of that stuff, now you can say Mahu in the newspaper. And to me, that's really an important step forward, because then you can use the exactly right word and people can hopefully understand it exactly.
Yeah, well, like that power that you chase, all the articles Jeremy has put together is that reclaiming of language. And it's even like when I live near Manhattan, and like having a marquee and a billboard that says Prince Faggot, which is, a raved about play right now, which I still haven't seen, but we'll see. I'm seeing Messy White Gaze because I'm very interested in that premise of it's a modern adaptation of Rope by Hitchcock. But even having the words Prince Faggot on a billboard, I think 5 years ago might not have even been done. And, I wonder, like, what you both are kind of bringing up is, how do those of us, like myself, having white European ancestry, like the colonizer language, how do those of us who have benefited or trace our ancestry from the colonizers and the white European ancestry, like, what's the most important thing to be aware of? Like, if it's not about necessarily like, oh no, I'm using the wrong language, or they get so nervous about saying the wrong words. It's kind of like those who get caught up about saying Black or African American, when the biggest importance is learning the history of the enslaved people in America. Like, is that what it is? Is just educating ourselves? Like, Dean, what's the best advice you have? And then, I'll go to Chase, but how can people just do a better job at learning the history that you're bringing to bear here?
By being responsible, by trying to learn the history, and most of all, by talking with people and being open to conversation and to talking with the people that you're talking about and who are the rightful people here to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all I.
Yeah, and Chase?
Yeah, definitely echoing that, Dean. Nicely said. And I think you're a really shining example of that and how you've been able to engage in really ethical and meaningful and relational ways with community in Hawaii. So I think it is absolutely possible, even if you're non-native, to join in solidarity around a lot of these issues and to not be afraid of getting it wrong. We all get it wrong from time to time. I certainly have blind spots myself. So yeah, just being bold and realizing that there's always more to know, and just kind of walking forth with that spirit of humility and positionality, starting where you are. So everyone's on someone's ancestral homelands. Like I said, here in Rhode Island, I'm on the ancestral homelands of the Narragansett Indian tribe, and I'm a visitor. This is not my ancestral homeland, so you can really start where you are and find out. whose lands you're on and how you can start working towards building stronger relationships with those people. And those people might not necessarily be there anymore. I think about my ancestors and how we were moved to Oklahoma during the Trail of Tears. And so there might be some indigenous peoples who were pushed from that land, but how do you join in their causes too, even if they have been displaced historically. So there are plenty of resources, usually at local libraries. Those are great places to go. Even if you're in an urban setting, there's usually a lot of urban intertribal gatherings and organizations and societies, certainly many Two-Spirit societies in many states. So yeah, just really starting where you are. And as Dean said, just getting to know the people there is the most important.
Yeah. So, there's so much more I could ask, but hopefully eventually, I know Jeremy, I'll have you back on as each issue. I like that you're, you know, uh, sitting here and absorbing, the thought process of the magazine. So hopefully you'll join me again for the next issue. But Dean and Chase, I'd love to have you back on, like whether it's more articles you do for the magazine or your own work, So definitely love to have more extended conversations. But Dean and Chase, I'd love if in these last few minutes, I know I'll give you one question that if you want to think about, if there's a film that you both recommend in pop culture that actually you think does a good job at indigenous culture, like whether it's the culture you study or just in general. Um, and also, what does queer male or queer manhood look like right now for both of your cultures? Like, in terms of, is it the same kind of rights that are being advocated for? Like, is it about same-sex marriage, or does it kind of exist in are their priorities maybe different than, say, um, like the queer male marriage question and rights that are being advocated for with white European, white American settler kind of history when it comes to queer manhood? So, I guess, Dean, what does it look like
Chase
for
first. Chase first.
Chase
I
first?
have
So,
to.
Chase, like, what does it look like for queer
Man.
manhood in Native
Okay.
American culture right now?
Wow. Excellent question. And I by no means could speak on behalf of the 500 plus tribal nations in the US and many, many more still seeking federal recognition. Yeah, yeah, manhood. That's a little bit tough to talk about and to tease apart, I think, just because when I think of many tribal communities, I think of the community and kinship networks and how a lot of times in thinking about the individual, I'm often thinking about the community, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's a little bit tricky around manhood, and I might have to get back to you on that. I don't know. I don't know that that's necessarily my specialty area around manhood.
But that's okay. No, I mean,
Okay.
what you just said, the kinship network, I think that's really
Okay, okay. You might need to
interesting.
chop a little bit of that, but yeah.
No, no. And I think like when you come back on for like a more extended conversation,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of different nuances, like you're saying, around that. Like question I even posed. Like
Yeah.
maybe that like what I posed even is a very we each have a different kind of vantage point where we would take that question. But also,
Yeah.
is there a film you think does a really good job with Native American representation?
Yeah, yeah, I was just thinking back to the manhood a little bit.
Oh,
And it's interesting because I think in Indigenous studies, what I sense and see is a lot of Indigenous feminisms and how that feminine energy is often centered more in these spaces due to the impact of colonization and things like the patriarchy and instilling a rigid gender binary to oppress many women, and how many tribes had matriarchal societies that relied more so on women or feminine spirits and energies. So I think that's what tripped me up a little bit with that question as I
yeah,
was
no,
reflecting.
that's interesting.
But also, to answer your question about the film, one that comes to mind for me that I watched a couple of years back, we had an amazing Two-Spirit speaker come to campus named Tavi Han. They're amazing. They're down in the Carolinas. and they had us watch The Roof, that's on Disney. And that was a really impactful film that I think is something that I would even assign in a future course, but it really talks about this, or really illustrates well what this idea of coming in can look like in a very indigenous sense. And it follows a young Mi'kmaq youth who's reconnecting with their tribal community and really gets at a lot of the nuance behind Two-Spirit identity in a powerful way. And that coming in theory is something I come back to a lot in my personal identity and in my work. And that was really gifted to the Indigenous health sciences and tribal communities by Dr. Alex Wilson, who's an amazing Cree scholar at the University of Saskatchewan. So this idea of coming in for Two-Spirit people really is a counter narrative to Western coming out stories that force people to declare their identities and come out in a mainstream society. And they really reconstruct the idea in a very provocative and indigenized way by saying, wait a minute, actually, for Two-Spirit people, we're actually coming into our communities and taking our sacred place in the circle to continue doing the good work that we do, and how there is just a much more inclusive pedagogy and ethos around the acceptance of Two-Spirit people in many tribal communities, even to this day. So I think that's a really, really interesting concept that Dr. Wilson has brought forth. But yeah, definitely recommend The Roof.
Yeah, thank you, Chase. And yeah, to learn more about that coming in, concept Chase is talking about, read his article in the Gay and Lesbian Review. And then Dean, yeah, same question. Like, if you want to offer a film or if you want to talk about the queer manhood question I posed, either is fine.
Well, in terms of film, I would suggest people check out Chief of War. It's on Apple TV, and it's not queer, but there's a little queer thread. It occupies just about the right amount of space, and it's not a big deal. It's just part of the culture and part of the history there. So I think that's really remarkable. I can't talk about Hawaiian manhood because I'm not Hawaiian, but I can say just over the last 3 years or so, there's been a resurgence, a new group forming of young Kanaka and other Pacific Islanders who are really reclaiming the use of Hawaiian culture and Hawaiian history as part of their own identity. And they talk a lot about being queered as the sense that all Hawaiians were queered and that they were put in some outside group, that they're different. And that's what happens. And that's how they've been queered. It's really they're Hawaiian first, and then their sexuality or their gender is just a secondary part of it. I think that's really remarkable.
Yeah.
In the politics, Hawaii is the most progressive state in the United States. We're even better than Massachusetts and many other different places. So we're very firm in that resolve, and we remain that way. But the national trends are coming through even here. I think last year we had somebody who was like gays against groomers. It's like just totally foreign ideas. It's like a second colonization, and it's really concerning. And I think that's what people really have to be worried about here and everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's like gender in many ways is
thankful note right before Thanksgiving, but we're all just a little bit nervous this year.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
I think to your point,
unfortunately,
Dean. Oops, so sorry.
no, go ahead, Chase. Yeah.
Yeah, that just reminded me that I feel like gender is so put on us in many ways, and how gender has played a pivotal role in the project of colonization and colonialism. And so I really like that position, Dean, that gender is an afterthought for many communities that we're working with, because it is so placed on us, and it is something that has been used as a tool in colonization of tribal communities. So thanks for bringing that up. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah. And I feel like this leaves us on a really interesting note. Like, even Dean, what you're saying about this I'm trying to remember exactly how you phrased it, but you said like a recolonization. Like, that's interesting because right now the administration is trying to sell fascism as a boutique concept. And, that is a whole kind of recolonization. I mean, it's also very Cold War, Soviet, dictatorial, lots of things going on. But I feel like that's why this issue couldn't come at a better time in the sense of learning about what happens when colonization and missionaries and this like language just erases the nuances of a culture. So, I'm so thankful for, Jeremy, what you've put together, Chase, what you've written, Dean. So, Dean, is there anything you want to, promote? Any like place where people can find your work?
Yeah. We're at queerhistoriesofhawaii.org.
Okay. And I think that's also your Instagram, isn't it?
Yes, Queer Histories of Hawaii Instagram. We even have a Facebook, but you don't have to go there. And our group is called Lei Pua'ala. We're like a garland of beautiful, fragrant flowers, all a little bit different, but all beautiful.
Yeah,
That's all.
Leipuaala. There you go.
Right.
And then Chase, same question, where can people find you?
Yeah. So no formal website, kind of a one-person show as of now while I'm finishing up my dissertation. But folks can connect with me on LinkedIn if they're interested. Just Chase Bryer, I should come up pretty easily. I also do a lot of work in community with the Two Spirit Dry Lab team that's located in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Coast Salish territories. So we have a website as well, twospiritdrylab.com, or .ca maybe. Maybe just Google Two Spirit Dry Lab, but we have plenty of resources around Two Spirit Health and a bunch of other researchers listed there for folks who are interested in learning more.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I know, Dean, you have to go. So I'm just going to probably end with Jeremy, if that's okay. And we'll
Great.
just plug the Gay and Lesbian review stuff. But Dean, thank you so much. And Chase, same, just can't wait to have you both back on sometime in the future.
Yeah,
I just want to keep picking
Right.
your brain.
Sounds good.
But yeah, thank you
absolutely.
both for your time. And I'll send you the links when it comes out.
Great.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Of
Thanks, Jeremy.
course. Bye,
Yep, see
Dean. Bye,
Bye.
y'all.
Chase.
Bye. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Hope you're in.
Okay. So, Jeremy, what else after such an exciting conversation with both Chase and Dean? Like, is there anything else, we can well, of course we can look forward to the future issues. Like, can you tease a little what's to come for the January, February issue?
It's so appropriate that you asked that because you kind of teased one of the features in the next issue. It's actually it's an art memo, but we have a piece coming on Prince Faggot and the use of the F slur specifically on stage by Jordan Schildkraut, who is a scholar of theater, and it's a really fascinating piece. I can say the January February issue is our first kink themed issue.
Ooh.
And we have some really fascinating pieces on how Robert Mapplethorpe, through his photography, helped make S&M more mainstream, on how Gen Z was exposed to a lot of kink and a lot of different sexual and gender possibilities through Tumblr back in the 2010s before they implemented strict new content restrictions in 2018, I think it was. More pieces. I don't need to necessarily outline them all. And then our following issue that we're starting to put together now is going to be on the Victorian era. So that should be of great interest to you, Andrew. And if you have any pieces you would like to submit, there's still time. And I also, if I could, real quick, because you were asking Dean and Chase about film recommendations, and there was something that came to my mind when the topic of Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's book, An Indigenous People People's History of the United States came up. That book was one of the main sources for, I think it was a 4-part docuseries on HBO called Exterminate All the Brutes, which was made by Raoul Peck, who is the same documentary filmmaker who made the James Baldwin documentary I Am Not Your Negro a few years ago. It's an excellent documentary for seeing how this it really ties into the theme of the issue, which Chase summed up really nicely a few minutes ago when he was talking about how colonialism sort of flattened and simplified much more complex ideas of gender and sexual identities that had existed in a lot of cultures around the world before, the binary was enforced upon people who didn't ask for it. That film is not specifically queer, or that docuseries, I should say. But Exterminate All the Brutes is really about what colonialism does in a society, and what the roots of colonialism are. And it, I'm a white European guy, lived my whole life in America, but I've done a DNA test. It's pretty much all like England and Ireland and Scotland. I don't have any claim to Indigenous heritage or to a direct understanding of that, but I learned a lot watching that series. And also, as long as you're checking out Raoul Peck, if you haven't seen I Am Not Your Negro, it is a great exploration of James Baldwin's life and work, and his own experience and views on race.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's an incredible documentary. So I definitely want to check out. I haven't seen Exterminate All the Brutes, so I need to watch that. And yeah, especially as I'm working my way through Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's book.
yeah, I bought the book after I watched that documentary because it was so fascinating, and I really I want to learn more, but I haven't gotten to reading it yet. But it's part of a very tall stack of books that I'm
Yes.
trying to
Yeah,
get to.
always a tall stack just building. Um, And Jeremy, this has just been so wonderful. I'm so, excited to welcome you on the podcast. Can't wait for, the kink episode. I'm sure we're going to have some really interesting conversations. It sounds like it's extending outside of the Marquis de Sade, which have you ever seen? I'm sure you have, but the Pier Paolo Pasolini 100, is it 100 Days of Sodom or 120 Days of
I think
Sodom?
it's 120.
Okay.
I've seen part of that. I don't think I've ever actually watched the whole thing. When I was in college, I did try to read the Marquis de Sade, and wow, that that left some very, very strong, not entirely pleasant the images inside my head that I will not describe on this
Yeah,
podcast.
it's like reading Jean Genet sometimes. Very, very fascinating. Um, yeah, Pasolini has done he did a really erotic Canterbury Tales that I showed part of a scene from, not a lot of it, but just very faithful to every kind of erotic story he portrays. Fascinating filmmaker. But also, yes, I'll be very eager to see what happens with this Victorian issue. And we'll talk with you about it because I actually am releasing soon in January. I interviewed like 2 years ago an Oscar Wilde scholar, but yeah, my main interest is in Victorian literature, mostly poetry, Oscar Wilde and Walt Whitman. So, love everything that deals with Victorian era. My students have been obsessed with My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. So, you know, can't wait. But yeah, Jeremy, how can everyone, follow the Gay and Lesbian Review and specifically to make sure that they become members and subscribe to the magazine?
Well, you can go to glreview.org to access our archives and subscribe to the magazine. You can do just a digital subscription if you're not somebody who wants a magazine in your mailbox every couple of months because you're just going to read it on a screen anyway. And it's a little less expensive, but you can also sign up for a subscription to the magazine, and either one gives you access to our full archives on the website, which go back to 2003. Not the full run of the magazine, but more than 20 years worth of it. And you can also find us on all the major social media platforms, except for the one owned by that Tesla guy. We're a little more active on social media now than we have been in the past. We're newly on TikTok now, and that's one of the things that I'm doing as part of my effort to reach more young people and to make sure the magazine stays relevant and keeps acquiring fresh readers for a long, long time. It actually the profile names are a little different on different platforms, but if you search Gay and Lesbian Review, you will probably find us. If you don't, search GNLR and you'll find us. And you can find me on all the platforms at Jeremy C. Fox.
Wonderful. Well, I'm in both worlds. I'm on TikTok, but I also have my print magazine because I love print magazines and I just love the glossy pages of the GNLR. But yeah, so happy you're on TikTok. I mean, I have loved TikTok and the way that I've gotten to connect with people who listen to the podcast and like share out clips. It's a very fun space when you learn all about the TikTok, as long as you don't get sucked into the addiction of TikTok. But that's for another conversation. That's like a anxious generation Jonathan Haidt conversation. But Jeremy, really wonderful to have you on, and I can't wait for more people to get their hands or just eyes on the magazine. Also, there is a promo code with glreview.org. You can use ITBR Choice, and it gets you a free issue of the magazine. So you could get this issue of Ethnographic Journeys as a free issue. So until next time, Jeremy, until January, end of January-ish, we'll be back here again. So really excited to see this kink issue.
I would love to come back. Thank you very much for having me and for including Chase and Dean and asking so many thoughtful questions. It was great conversation.
Of course. Thank you, Jeremy. And to everyone out there, have a wonderful holiday season. Oh, GL Review, great magazine for a holiday gift. There you go.
Absolutely. Any queer person or ally in your life who wants to learn more about the community, we're here for you.
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely think I might be gifting it to, some who will enjoy the reading material.